Family, hear me today. There comes a time in your life when the atmosphere shifts, when the ordinary no longer satisfies, and when the weight of expectation presses on your heart so heavily that you know something greater is on the horizon. It is not coincidence. It is not luck. It is not random. It is divine preparation. When God is about to give you something big, He will stir your spirit in ways you cannot ignore. But let me warn you, before the blessing comes the breaking, before the crown comes the cross, before the promotion comes the preparation. You may be facing trials that feel overwhelming right now. Your prayers may feel like they've hit the ceiling. Your resources may look too small. But that is exactly the ground where God plants greatness. Don't mistake your current struggle as evidence of His absence. It's actually the setup for His overflow. Think about it. A seed must be buried before it bursts forth into new life. A diamond is formed under pressure. Gold is purified in fire. And you, my friend, are no different. The adversity you are facing is not the end of your story. It is the proof that God is positioning you for something beyond your imagination. When God is about to release something big into your life, He often requires you to release something small. That comfort zone you've been clinging to, it must go. That fear that whispers you're not enough, it must be silenced. That doubt that chains your faith, it must be broken. Because the God who is preparing you will never pour something big into hands that are still gripping something small. When you find yourself in a season of struggle, it is so easy to assume that you are somehow moving backward or that life has turned against you. But the truth is, what looks like a setback is very often the very stage God uses to set you up for the blessing He has already prepared. Struggles are not meaningless. They are the divine tools that shape your spirit, build your character, and stretch your faith beyond limits you never imagined. You see, the path to greatness is never smooth. The weight of trials is not there to crush you, but to condition you. Just like an athlete cannot expect victory without resistance, you cannot expect destiny without challenges. Every storm that shakes you is also strengthening you. Every delay that frustrates you is also developing you. And every closed door that seems to disappoint you is actually pushing you toward the right door. God has already opened in His timing. Think of the greatest stories of victory throughout history, whether it's in scripture, in leadership, or in personal testimonies. None of them came without the fire of struggle. Struggles refine you in ways comfort never can. Comfort zones do not produce courage. Easy paths do not create strength. It is the weight of difficulty that proves to you that you are capable of carrying more than you thought. When you walk through trials, you discover the depth of your endurance, the resilience of your spirit, and the unshakable power of your faith. Without struggle, there is no growth, no transformation, no story worth telling. The struggle is not a prison. It is a classroom where God Himself becomes your teacher. When you are going through what feels like a setback, remember that perspective is everything. The enemy wants you to interpret your struggle as punishment, as if God has forgotten you. But the reality is that your struggle is evidence that God is preparing you for something greater. The enemy only fights what threatens him. If your future was not powerful, if your calling was not significant, if your blessing was not valuable, the resistance would not be so fierce. Struggles are often the loudest proof that something is on its way. Instead of asking, why me? Start declaring, try me. Because if God allowed the storm to come into your life, He already equipped you with the strength to walk through it. What looks like loss today may actually be the setup for gain tomorrow. Think of a slingshot. The further it is pulled back, the farther forward it can launch. That pullback season where everything feels like it's going in the opposite direction of your dreams is often the tension required to release you into the destiny you were born to fulfill. God uses the struggle to stretch you, not to destroy you. The tension, the resistance, the hardship, it's not wasted. It's building the launch power for what's coming next. There are times in life when everything around you seems to fall apart. Relationships break down. Finances dry up. Opportunities vanish. And in those moments, the human instinct is to see only the destruction. But spiritually, those seasons are often construction zones. What you think is breaking you is actually making room for something better. God removes what is unstable so that he can build on a foundation that will last. The setback is not designed to leave you stranded. It is designed to clear space for a blessing bigger than you imagined. Struggle also reveals who you really are and who is really with you. When life is easy, everyone can walk with you. But when life gets hard, when the storms hit and the fire rages, that's when true loyalty, true character, and true strength are revealed. Struggle strips away the unnecessary and leaves behind only what is solid. It forces you to confront your weaknesses, but also shows you the depth of your strength. You will never know how strong your faith is until it is tested. You will never know the power of your resilience until it is stretched. And you will never know the depth of your courage until you have no choice but to be brave. When you're facing trials, it's natural to feel weary, to want to quit, to believe that maybe this is the end. But often the darkest night comes just before the brightest morning. The pain you feel is often the labor pain of a new season about to be birthed. You do not give up in labor because of the pain. You push through because you know new life is about to be born. In the same way, when you're in the middle of struggle, do not throw in the towel. Instead, recognize that your struggle is birthing strength, vision, and opportunities that could not come any other way. The greatest leaders, the strongest warriors, the most impactful people you admire, all share one thing in common. They walked through struggle. And they didn't just walk through it, they allowed the struggle to transform them. They came out wiser, stronger, and more focused because they understood that setbacks are never the end. They are setups for comebacks. They are divine interruptions designed to redirect you toward what truly matters. So the next time you find yourself in a battle that feels unbearable, remind yourself that the presence of struggle is not the absence of God's hand. It is the evidence of his preparation. If you are in the fire, it is because you are being refined for gold. If you are in the storm, it is because you are being trained to walk on waves. If you are in the valley, it is because a mountain is waiting for you to climb. Every tear, every frustration, every delay, it is all part of the process that proves your struggle is not a setback, but a divine setup for something greater. Before the blessing comes the breaking. This is a truth most people try to run away from, yet it is one of the most consistent patterns in the way God works with his people. The breaking is never designed to destroy you, but to strip away what cannot go with you into your next season. Too often we ask for increase while holding on to things that are too small to sustain the weight of what is coming. Breaking seasons separate you from what is temporary, so you can be prepared for what is eternal. Think of a seed. No matter how much potential it carries inside, it must first be buried in darkness and broken apart before it produces life. Without that breaking, the seed remains nothing more than potential. The process that feels like death is actually the very thing that activates destiny. Breaking seasons feel uncomfortable because they touch the areas of your life you thought were secure. They challenge the pride you didn't know was hiding. They expose the weaknesses you tried to ignore. They dismantle the comfort zones you leaned on too long. And when you feel like everything around you is being shaken, what is really happening is that God is removing the scaffolding of self-reliance so you can lean fully on him. Breaking pulls you away from what you thought you needed so you can discover what you really need. It empties your hands of what is fragile so that your hands can be filled with what is eternal. The greatest blessings in life are always preceded by seasons of surrender. But surrender is never easy because it often feels like loss. You may lose relationships you thought would last forever. You may lose opportunities you were certain were the key to your future. You may lose the identity you built around success, possessions, or people. And when those things are broken off, it feels like pieces of you are falling away. But those very pieces were never meant to define you. The breaking strips away false identities so that the true identity God gave you can finally emerge. If you study the lives of those who walked in greatness, you'll notice the pattern. Before Joseph sat in a palace, he sat in a pit and a prison. Before David wore a crown, he hid in caves running for his life. Before Moses led a nation, he was broken in the wilderness for 40 years. And before Jesus rose in victory, he hung broken on a cross. The blessing never comes first, the breaking does. Because the breaking humbles you, purifies you, and gets you ready to carry what you could not have carried in your own strength. Without the breaking, the blessing would crush you. Breaking seasons are often misunderstood. People around you may misjudge your process. They may think you're losing, when in reality you're being prepared. They may think you're forgotten, when in reality you're being hidden. They may think you're finished, when in reality God is just getting started. When glass shatters, it seems ruined, but when a seed breaks, it brings forth life. The difference lies in perspective. What looks like the end in your eyes may be the beginning in God's plan. Breaking also produces hunger. When you lose what you leaned on, your spirit begins to crave what only God can provide. Breaking makes you desperate enough to pray deeper, worship harder, and seek Him more passionately than you ever did before. Without that desperation, we stay comfortable in surface-level faith. But breaking digs deep into the soil of your soul until you realize that God is your only true source. That's when your roots grow stronger, and that's when your faith becomes unshakable. The beauty of breaking is that it prepares you to value the blessing when it comes. If you had received it too soon, you would have squandered it. If you had walked into it without being refined, you would have mishandled it. But because you endured the breaking, you now recognize the worth of what God places in your hands. You become more grateful, more careful, more intentional. The blessing no longer becomes about you. It becomes about what God can do through you. Breaking seasons also build compassion. When you've been broken, you understand the pain of others in a way you never did before. You carry empathy because you know what it feels like to hurt. You can look into someone's eyes and see beyond their smile to the silent struggles behind it. Breaking shapes you into a vessel God can use not only for your own blessing, but to be a blessing to others. Without the breaking, your influence would remain shallow. With the breaking, your influence becomes transformative. There is also an authority that comes from brokenness. When you speak after surviving a breaking season, your words carry weight. People listen not because of titles or positions, but because they sense the authenticity of someone who has been through the fire and still stands. Your scars become testimonies. Your pain becomes proof. Your journey becomes a map for someone else walking through their breaking. So when life feels like it is crumbling, when you are being stretched beyond your limits, when everything you counted on is being stripped away, it is not the end. It is the breaking, and breaking is always the doorway to blessing. When God is preparing to release something great into your life, He often asks you to let go of the small things that occupy your hands and your heart. Many times we find ourselves clinging tightly to what feels safe, what feels familiar, and what feels manageable. But the truth is, you cannot hold on to the temporary and expect God to trust you with the eternal. You cannot grasp what is little and expect Him to fill you with what is limitless. God never pours something big into hands that are still holding on to something small. Fear is one of the first things you must release. Fear will paralyze you and convince you that the small, familiar space you occupy now is safer than the unknown path God is calling you to walk. Fear whispers lies that tell you, stay where you are, don't take the risk. Don't step out, you might fail. But every great destiny requires courage, and courage cannot coexist with fear. Fear is the chain that keeps you bound to the ground, while faith is the wind that allows you to soar. Until you release fear, your hands are too full of doubt to catch the blessing that requires bold trust. Another thing God often requires you to release is doubt. Doubt may not sound dangerous at first, but it eats away at your faith like a slow poison. It convinces you to expect little when God has promised much. It keeps you from praying bold prayers, from dreaming bigger, from believing that His promises apply to you. Doubt shrinks your perspective and convinces you to settle for crumbs when God has prepared a feast. If you continue to clutch doubt in your hands, how can you ever receive the abundance of God's provision? Letting go of doubt is not easy because it means surrendering control and choosing to trust even when the evidence looks dim. But when you release it, your faith grows in ways that make room for the extraordinary. Comfort zones are also small things that must be released. Comfort may feel good for a season, but it is also the enemy of growth. Comfort zones lull you into stagnation, convincing you that the place you've been is good enough, that the level you've reached is sufficient, and that stretching further is unnecessary. Yet every time God wants to elevate you, he calls you out of your comfort zone. Abraham had to leave his home and everything familiar to step into God's promise. Peter had to step out of the boat to walk on water. Every great movement forward requires leaving behind the familiar. You cannot carry comfort zones into the territory of destiny because destiny always demands courage, risk, and obedience. Sometimes the small things God asks you to release are relationships. Not every person in your life is assigned to your future. Some are only there for a season, and holding on to them longer than intended can actually delay your progress. Relationships that drain your faith, diminish your vision, or distract you from your calling cannot accompany you into your next level. Letting go is hard, but holding on to the wrong people can keep your hands too full to receive the right ones. When God wants to bless you, he often sends people. And when the enemy wants to hinder you, he also sends people. Discernment is required to know who to release so that you can embrace those meant to walk with you in the season ahead. There are also habits and mindsets that seem small but can block the big things God has for you. A limited mindset that says, this is all I'll ever be, or this is as far as I can go, becomes a ceiling that caps your potential. A habit of procrastination, laziness, or inconsistency can make you unprepared for opportunities when they arrive. God does not just bless intentions, he blesses preparation. That means releasing not only the external things, but also the internal patterns that keep you trapped in small cycles. You cannot think small and walk in something big. You cannot behave like yesterday and expect tomorrow's promise. Sometimes what God asks you to release is even something good, but not best. There are seasons when you must let go of something that worked before, because it is no longer the right fit for where you're going. The manna that sustained Israel in the wilderness was good, but when they stepped into the promised land, God provided a new way. If they had clung to the old, they would have missed the abundance of the new. In the same way, you must be willing to release even good things when God calls you higher. Good can become the enemy of great if you hold on to it too tightly. This process of release is never easy. It requires faith to loosen your grip on what you can see and trust God for what you cannot. It requires courage to let go of the familiar and step into the unknown. It requires obedience to release what you think you need in order to receive what God knows you need. But the truth remains, you cannot carry small things and expect God to entrust you with something big. He is looking for open hands, surrendered hearts, and uncluttered lives ready to receive. The act of release is the key that unlocks the greater. It is the space you create through letting go that becomes the vessel he fills. There are moments in life when it feels as if you have been placed on a shelf, tucked away where no one can see you. No one notices you, and no one seems to acknowledge the gifts, the effort, or the potential you carry. It feels like you are being overlooked, ignored, or forgotten. But what seems like abandonment is actually divine strategy. Hidden seasons are not wasted seasons. They are holy seasons. When God hides you, it is not rejection, it is protection. He places you in a concealed place so that he can prepare you without the interference of premature exposure. Too many people want to be seen before they are ready, and when they rush into visibility without maturity, the weight of influence crushes them. But God loves you too much to let that happen. So he hides you, molds you, and strengthens you in the secret place before bringing you into the spotlight. The hidden season is where roots grow deep. Think about a tree. Before it ever towers above the ground, it spends a long time growing underground, sending roots deeper and deeper into the soil. No one applauds the roots, no one takes pictures of the roots, no one even notices them. But those roots are what keep the tree standing when storms come. In the same way, your hidden season is where God is growing your roots, your character, your faith, your endurance, so that when he elevates you, you will not be shaken by winds of adversity or destroyed by the storms of life. The deeper the root, the greater the fruit. Hidden seasons also protect you from enemies who are not meant to see what God is doing in you. If you were visible too soon, the opposition would try to snatch the promise before it matures. Just as a farmer does not harvest a crop before it ripens, God does not reveal you before the right time. He allows you to develop in secrecy so that by the time you are revealed, no enemy can uproot what he has planted. What feels like obscurity is really divine shielding. While you think nothing is happening, God is quietly weaving threads of destiny, aligning opportunities, and strengthening you in ways you may not even recognize. There is also a stripping that happens in hidden seasons. When you are unseen, you cannot rely on applause, validation, or recognition to fuel you. You are forced to rely on God alone. It is in the hidden place where you learn to pray without a stage, to worship without a crowd, to serve without reward. It is where you discover that your identity is not tied to visibility, but to intimacy with God. Many people crave platforms, but platforms without intimacy lead to emptiness. The hidden season is where intimacy is cultivated, where you learn that God's approval matters more than the approval of people. That kind of grounding cannot be learned in the spotlight. It can only be forged in obscurity. Hidden seasons also test your patience and trust. Waiting is never easy. It feels like the world is moving forward without you, like opportunities are passing you by, like others are being promoted while you remain in the shadows. But in reality, God is teaching you to trust his timing. Delay is not denial. Silence is not absence. Hiddenness is not abandonment. These seasons stretch your faith until you stop striving for man's recognition and start resting in God's process. When you finally come to peace with being hidden, you prove that you can be trusted with being seen. It is in these unseen seasons that skills are sharpened. David did not become a warrior on the battlefield. He became a warrior in the fields, tending sheep, fighting off lions and bears when no one was watching. Moses did not become a leader in the palace. He became a leader in the wilderness, far from the eyes of a nation. Jesus himself spent 30 years in obscurity, preparing for 3 years of ministry that would change the world. The hidden place is where training happens, where discipline is forged and where excellence is refined. When you feel like no one is paying attention, that is the very season God is shaping you into someone ready for the stage. He is preparing. What often makes hidden seasons difficult is the temptation to rush out of them. We get restless, anxious, and eager for exposure, but rushing ahead of God's timing is dangerous. A fruit picked before it ripens is bitter. A soldier sent into battle before training is vulnerable. A leader elevated without preparation is fragile. The waiting is painful, but it is purposeful. Every moment in the hidden place is adding strength, wisdom, and maturity to your life. The delay is not wasted. It is storing up resilience that you will need later when the weight of your calling grows heavier. Hidden seasons are also humbling. They strip away pride and ambition. They remind you that promotion does not come from people, it comes from God. Being unseen teaches you that your value does not decrease just because you are not visible. Gold is valuable, whether it is on display or buried underground. Diamonds are precious, whether they are in the showcase or hidden in the earth. Your worth is not diminished in obscurity. It is being preserved for the right time. God hides treasures until they are ready to be revealed. And if you feel hidden, it only means you are more valuable than you realize. There is power in embracing the hidden season instead of resisting it. The place you feel overlooked is the very place God is overlooking you with his protection. The place you feel forgotten is the very place God is remembering every prayer, every tear, every act of faithfulness you have sown in secret. What you do in the hidden season matters because it builds the foundation for what will be seen later. Your consistency, your discipline, your integrity behind closed doors are what qualify you for influence when the doors open. The hidden place is holy ground, sacred preparation, and divine strategy working in your favor even when it feels silent. Delays are some of the most difficult seasons to endure because they test both your patience and your faith. When you are waiting on something you know God has promised, every day can feel like an eternity. Every prayer can feel like it is bouncing off the ceiling, and every moment of silence can feel like rejection. Yet what we call delay, heaven calls strategy. God's timing is never late, but it is also never rushed. He knows exactly when the pieces of your life, the circumstances around you, and the people connected to your destiny must align before he releases what he has in store. If the blessing arrived too early, you might mishandle it. If it came too late, it might miss its purpose. So he holds it until the appointed time, and that holding period, what feels like delay, is actually divine strategy at work. Delays teach you how to depend on God's voice more than your own vision. When you cannot see movement, you are forced to listen more closely, pray more deeply, and trust more fully. Waiting seasons strip away your reliance on instant gratification and train you in perseverance. The world moves fast, but God moves with precision. You may want the promise right now, but he knows what weight you can carry, and he will not give you something that destroys you because you are not ready. In delay, you are being built up, stretched, and equipped so that when the door opens, you can walk through it with stability and strength. Think of how many times in history great destinies were preceded by long seasons of waiting. Joseph dreamed as a teenager of influence and leadership, but years passed in slavery and prison before he saw the fulfillment. David was anointed king as a young boy, yet he spent years running from Saul before he sat on the throne. Even the children of Israel wandered for 40 years in the wilderness before entering the promised land. Every delay was not wasted time, it was preparation time. It was in those waiting years that faith was strengthened, character was shaped, and trust was proven. Without the delay, the destiny could not have been sustained. Delays also expose what is in your heart. When things don't happen on your schedule, how do you respond? Do you give up? Do you complain? Do you stop praying? Or do you keep pressing forward, believing that what God said he will surely do? Delay has a way of refining motives. Some people only want the blessing for themselves, but delay sifts that desire and reveals whether you truly want God's will above your own. It separates the impatient from the faithful, the shallow from the steadfast. If you can worship in the waiting, serve in the silence, and believe in the in-between, you prove that your heart is anchored in trust, not in timing. Delays are also protective. Many times, what you think is ready for you is actually not yet safe for you. That opportunity you crave may look perfect on the surface, but behind the scenes, it is not aligned. That relationship you want may not yet be matured enough to bless you. That promotion you are eager for might expose you to pressures you cannot handle yet. God delays not to punish, but to shield. He sees the traps, the dangers, the unseen battles waiting ahead, and he lovingly holds you back until he has cleared the path. What feels like a frustrating pause is often a merciful preservation. In the midst of delay, your faith muscles are exercised. Waiting is a weight room. Every day you choose to trust instead of doubt. You are lifting the weight of faith and building spiritual strength. That strength will be necessary when the blessing arrives, because greater blessings always attract greater battles. If you do not build endurance in the waiting season, you will crumble under the weight of what you prayed for. Delay is not wasted time, it is strengthening time, ensuring that when you step into your promise, you can stand tall and not collapse. Delays also deepen gratitude. When something comes quickly and easily, we tend to take it for granted. But when you have labored in prayer, endured in faith, and waited with patience, you value the blessing more deeply when it finally arrives. It no longer feels casual, it feels sacred. You handle it with care because you know the cost of the waiting. You no longer waste opportunities or squander blessings because you understand how precious they are. Gratitude born from delay produces stewardship, and stewardship ensures that what God gives you multiplies instead of evaporates. There is also a mystery to divine timing that goes beyond our understanding. While you are waiting, God is not only working in you, but he is also working in the people, places, and circumstances connected to your destiny. He is orchestrating alignments you cannot see, moving hearts you don't know, and preparing environments you are unaware of. By the time your moment arrives, everything will be positioned perfectly, and you will realize the delay was not wasted at all. It was the invisible hand of God arranging every detail so that the blessing not only comes, but comes at the exact moment it will have the greatest impact. Delays will test your endurance, stretch your faith, and humble your spirit, but they are never wasted. They are divine strategies that align timing, character, and purpose, so that when the blessing is finally released, it will not only bless you, but overflow through you to others. The opposition is confirmation of the opportunity. Every time you step closer to your calling, every time you draw nearer to the blessing, every time you begin to rise into the place God has destined for you, resistance will show up. Opposition is not a sign that you are failing. It is proof that you are carrying something powerful. The enemy does not waste energy on people who pose no threat. He fights hardest against those who are on the verge of breakthrough, those who carry influence, those who are walking into assignments that will impact lives beyond their own. If the battles in your life feel intense, it is not because you are weak, but because what you are carrying is valuable. Pressure always surrounds treasure, and resistance always rises when destiny is near. Opposition takes many forms. Sometimes it comes from people, critics, doubters, even friends or family who cannot see what God has placed inside you. Sometimes it comes from circumstances, doors that close suddenly, resources that seem to vanish, obstacles that appear out of nowhere. Sometimes it even comes from within, fear, insecurity, or the voice in your mind telling you to quit. But no matter what form it takes, opposition is a sign that the opportunity ahead of you is too significant for the enemy to leave unchallenged. If your future were small, the fight would be small. The size of the battle often reveals the size of the blessing waiting on the other side. Think of David. When he faced Goliath, the giant was not just a random obstacle, he was confirmation of David's calling. David's opposition was the doorway to his opportunity. Without the giant, there would have been no platform for his victory, no recognition of his anointing, no sudden rise from shepherd boy to warrior. The giant looked like a problem, but in reality, the giant was proof that God was about to elevate him. The same is true for you. The battles you face today are not random. They are connected to your destiny. The enemy attacks hardest in the area he fears most. Opposition also sharpens you. Pressure forces you to grow, to dig deeper into prayer, to lean harder on faith, to rise with courage you did not know you had. Without opposition, you would remain comfortable, stagnant, and untested. It is resistance that builds strength. Just as muscles only grow when they push against weight, your faith only grows when it pushes against adversity. Every trial, every critic, every setback you endure is strengthening you for the opportunity you are about to carry. Opposition is the gymnasium of destiny, training you for the weight of influence that blessing will bring. What many people miss is that opposition often comes right before breakthrough. The darkest nights often precede the brightest mornings. The greatest pressure comes right before the release. A woman in labor feels the greatest pain moments before the child is born. In the same way, when opposition feels unbearable, it is often because you are on the edge of stepping into something new. The enemy fights hardest when he knows his time is short, when he senses you are close to crossing into a place of fulfillment. If you give up in that moment, you forfeit what was waiting on the other side. But if you endure, you step into the opportunity opposition was trying to block. Opposition also reveals who is truly for you and who is not. When the battles intensify, some people will walk away and others will rise to stand with you. The pressure sifts relationships and reveals motives. Those who only loved you for what you could give will vanish, but those who are truly aligned with your destiny will remain. Opposition purifies your circle, ensuring that when you walk into opportunity, you are not surrounded by those who would sabotage it. Another truth about opposition is that it often disguises itself as delay or denial, but it is really redirection. When one door closes, you may feel blocked, but that closed door could be the very thing that pushes you toward the right door. What looks like opposition is sometimes divine orchestration, forcing you to take the path that leads to your true destiny. Joseph faced opposition from his brothers, from false accusations, from imprisonment, yet every piece of opposition pushed him closer to the palace. Without the betrayal, he would never have reached Egypt. Without the prison, he would never have met the cupbearer. Without those setbacks, he would never have stood before Pharaoh. The opposition was not the end, it was the path. The presence of opposition also teaches you how to depend on God's strength instead of your own. If everything came easy, you might believe your success was because of your own ability. But when you face battles too big for you to fight, you are reminded that the victory comes from God alone. Opposition drives you to your knees in prayer, teaches you to rely on His wisdom, and shows you that your strength is not enough. And when you overcome, you know without a doubt that it was His hand that carried you. That assurance gives you boldness to face the next battle, because you know the same God who brought you through before will do it again. So opposition is not something to fear or avoid. It is something to recognize as confirmation. The greater the calling, the greater the conflict. The bigger the promise, the bigger the pressure. Every time you encounter resistance, remind yourself that it is a signal. It is telling you that opportunity is near, that breakthrough is close, that destiny is calling. The fight you face is not proof that you are going the wrong way. It is evidence that you are on the right path. Opposition is the enemy's last attempt to stop what he knows he cannot ultimately prevent. Faith must be bigger than fear. Fear has a way of shrinking your perspective, making the obstacle look larger than the promise, making the problem look greater than the solution, and making the enemy look stronger than your God. Fear feeds off what you see, while faith feeds off what you believe. If you allow fear to dominate your vision, you will always see yourself as too small, too weak, too unqualified. But when faith rises within you, you begin to see through the lens of possibility, through the lens of God's power, through the lens of what He has spoken over your life. Fear says you can't, but faith declares with God all things are possible. Faith does not ignore reality. It sees reality through the eyes of divine authority. Faith looks at the Red Sea in front of you and says, it will part. Faith looks at the walls of Jericho and says, they will fall. Faith looks at the giant standing in your path and says, he will be defeated. Fear will always magnify the challenge, but faith magnifies the God who is greater than the challenge. This is why your faith must always be bigger than your fear, because what you magnify is what will dominate your life. Fear thrives in uncertainty, in the unknown, in the places where you do not have control. But the life of faith is built on trust, not control. Faith is the decision to step out, even when you cannot see the whole path. Abraham left his homeland without knowing where he was going. Peter stepped out of the boat without knowing how long he could stand on the water. Faith does not wait for clarity. It moves in obedience. Fear waits for guarantees, but faith moves on promises. If you allow fear to control your steps, you will stay stuck where it feels safe, but never enter where God has called you. The truth is, fear will never fully disappear. Every great step of faith comes with the presence of fear, whispering in the background. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is the choice to move forward in spite of it. You may feel the trembling in your hands, the uncertainty in your heart, the doubts in your mind. But when you act in faith, you prove that God's word means more to you than the voice of fear. Faith silences fear not by denying its presence, but by overpowering it with trust. Faith is bigger than fear because it has roots in something eternal. Fear is temporary, built on shifting circumstances and fleeting emotions. Faith is anchored in the eternal character of God, His goodness, His power, His promises. Circumstances may change, feelings may fluctuate, but God remains the same yesterday, today, and forever. That is why faith holds firm even when everything around you is shaking. Fear builds its house on sand, but faith builds its house on the rock. And when the storm comes, only one will stand. When faith becomes bigger than fear, Your language changes. Instead of speaking defeat, you start speaking victory. Instead of saying, I can't, you start declaring, God will. Your words carry power, and fear often seeps into your spirit through your own confession. The more you talk about how impossible something is, the stronger fear becomes. But when you start declaring the promises of God, fear begins to lose its grip. Faith-filled words shift the atmosphere. They remind you of what God has said instead of what fear is screaming. Faith bigger than fear also produces action. It is not enough to believe quietly. Faith requires steps. The woman with the issue of blood pressed through the crowd, even though fear could have kept her hidden. The blind man cried out louder, even though fear could have silenced him. Joshua marched around Jericho, even though fear could have convinced him the walls were unmovable. Faith is not passive, it is active. It proves itself through bold movement. Every time you take a step in faith, fear loses its power. Fear will always try to chain you to the past, reminding you of failures, mistakes, disappointments. It says, remember the last time you tried and it didn't work. But faith focuses forward. Faith says, God is doing a new thing. The past does not define me. His mercy is new every morning. Faith breaks the grip of past fear by believing in future promise. You cannot walk forward while staring backward, and you cannot move in faith while listening to fear. There will always be a battle between faith and fear, but the one you feed is the one that grows. Feed fear and it will consume you. Feed faith and it will carry you. Fear grows when you meditate on problems, but faith grows when you meditate on promises. Fear thrives when you dwell on worst-case scenarios, but faith thrives when you dwell on God's faithfulness. What you choose to focus on determines which one dominates your heart. Faith must be bigger than fear because your destiny depends on it. Every great opportunity will come with risks, challenges, and unknowns. Fear will always give you a reason to stay comfortable, but faith will always give you a reason to move forward. Fear will try to paralyze you at the edge of your breakthrough, but faith will push you across the line. Fear will keep you in the boat, but faith will make you walk on water. Fear will lock you in the wilderness, but faith will lead you into the promised land. Fear will whisper that you are too small, but faith will remind you that God is bigger. When faith rises above fear, you stop seeing yourself as a victim of circumstances and start seeing yourself as a vessel of divine power. You realize that fear may roar loudly, but it has no authority over you. You understand that the same power that raised Christ from the dead lives in you, and that power is greater than anything fear can conjure. When faith is bigger than fear, you no longer wait for perfect conditions. You step out knowing that God himself goes before you, behind you, and within you. Destiny requires boldness. Playing it safe will never unlock the fullness of what God has placed inside you. Playing small, hiding behind excuses, waiting for the perfect moment, these are the chains that keep people bound to an ordinary life when they were created for extraordinary impact. Destiny does not open its doors to hesitation. It responds to courage. Boldness is the bridge between where you are and where you are called to be. Without it, dreams remain ideas, promises remain words on paper, and potential remains buried within. Boldness is what pulls vision out of the unseen and brings it into reality. Boldness is not arrogance. It is confidence rooted in faith. It is not about trusting in your own strength, but in the one who called you. When you are bold, you are declaring that his power is greater than your weakness. His plan is greater than your fears. His resources are greater than your lack. Boldness is not about having all the answers. It is about being willing to step forward even when the answers are unclear. It is standing in front of the Red Sea, lifting up your staff and believing it will part. It is stepping into the Jordan River before it dries up. It is walking around Jericho 7 times, trusting that the walls will fall. Boldness moves first and the miracle follows. Destiny requires boldness because destiny always comes with risk. You cannot enter new levels without leaving old ones behind. You cannot claim the promised land while clinging to the comfort of the wilderness. Boldness demands that you let go of what is familiar to reach for what is greater. It pushes you out of your comfort zone, where growth, elevation, and transformation take place. Comfort never produces calling. It is only when you step into the unknown, when you take the risk, when you dare to believe bigger, that destiny begins to unfold. Fear will always tell you to stay where it is safe. It will whisper that the risk is too high, the odds are too great, the cost is too heavy. But boldness answers fear with faith. Boldness looks at the same challenge fear is staring at, but sees it through the lens of possibility. Fear magnifies the problem. Boldness magnifies the promise. Fear says the giant is too big to fight. Boldness says the giant is too big to miss. Fear says the storm is too strong. Boldness says the one who calms storms is in the boat with me. Boldness shifts the perspective and empowers you to act in ways fear never could. Boldness is required because destiny will not chase you. You must pursue it. The doors of opportunity